everyone, it was just a quiet life, but oh well, back to the reviews. Welcome back to another video. Today we're taking a look at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, which is the fourth part of the series, and I gotta say, I really came into this one skeptical because Stardust Crusaders was easily my favorite part of the show, so much more than parts 1 or part 2, and I'd really fallen in love with all of the characters, you know, with our Jotaro and Abdul, and especially that part with Jonathan and Abdul when they had the magnetic body, stuff like that. It was really funny. I fell in love with the show, and of course, Dio Brando, which wasn't going to be around anymore. I think we had all fallen in love with Dio Brando just a little bit, even though he kind of tortures dogs. He's a really badass character, and also he's a really funny character to add in all your anime memes, so that's definitely a thing. And coming into Diamond is Unbreakable, I felt like that I was just pleasantly surprised in this as a whole. Not only did they change up the environment on us and the art style with that as well, it was still something that I felt fit just right along in that JoJo universe. I think the strongest element in Diamond is Unbreakable is easily its characters, and I feel like it's here that it also outshines many of the previous parts of the series as well, which is practically everything from part 1 through part 3, and I know that's kind of saying a lot, but I feel like there are many JoJo characters who come off as just being 1 or 2 bit comic book style side characters who are mostly there for comedic relief and also to have a good fight, but they don't add a whole lot of substance to the show. And the same thing goes for some of the villains as well, namely Dio Brando. Not necessarily that any of these are bad because they worked for the roles that they were given, but I felt like characters in Diamond is Unbreakable definitely rectified some of those issues in adding substance to the show, such as Koishi, for example, who is a character that underwent probably the largest amount of development that we saw within the show, where he started off helpless, and through the power of his stand and also being put in dangerous circumstances, he was able to overcome some of his fears and also develop as a character. And I also appreciated the fact that his stand wasn't necessarily a powerful one. In fact, it was incredibly weak, and he had to rely on using the power of sound to work his way out of certain situations. We also had Okuyasu as well, and despite the fact that he was kind of one of the characters that was mostly there as a comedic relief and also to have a few good fights, we see that he had a very strong introduction to the show, where his father was introduced as being involved with Dio Brando, and then we also had his brother who was killed with someone who had gained special stand abilities from that legendary bow and arrow that they were all chasing around the city. And that was something that I also thought was really interesting too, because we got to learn a little bit more about the history of JoJo and see that that bow and arrow was actually responsible for giving Dio Brando his power of the stand as well. And that's something that I'm always curious to learn more about, but I'm not sure how often we're going to find that they go back and look at some of the previous parts of the show in that level of detail like that. In addition to the expansive cast of characters, I felt the show did a consistent job in terms of creating a balance between the characters' powers in order to create these impressive and really enjoyable fights that they have, and I felt they did the same quality in Stardust Crusaders, but even more so with Diamond, because you have to imagine some of the characters are even stronger, and they've pushed the envelope so far, so they have to do just more bizarre things with the characters' powers. And also you have to imagine that you have Josuke, who can bring people back from the brink of death, not total death, but he can really heal some gnarly injuries out there. But we also see that Jotaro can actually stop time, so any form of time manipulation is an incredibly overpowered ability, but I think they did a really good job in terms of handling that to kind of nerf that down and not make it seem like he's an all-powerful character, because he just can't control it for a long period of time, just for a single second, we see. And I thought they did a really good job in executing that and showing how he is not totally invincible, because he can control time for at least 1 second there. So there was one episode that I really enjoyed that had this rat that had the power of a stand, and we can actually see Jotaro fighting against that, where he is actually put at a disadvantage despite the fact that he can in ways manipulate time, where he's being shot at, and you see that he tries to dodge out of the way of some of the bullets, but he's only able to dodge out of the way of some of them before some of the rest of them get them, because he could control time, or at least pause time, but not for long enough for him to dodge all of the bullets there. So he isn't a character that is like all-powerful despite the fact that he is completely overpowered in terms of his abilities. And as far as some of the other characters are concerned, such as the villain, Kiera, for example, let's talk about Kiera. I felt they did such a good job in creating Kiera here, because when you compare him to some of the other villains in the previous stories, I mean, obviously, a lot of it is Dio Brando, and he works a lot in the shadows, and we don't really get to see him on screen a lot. But Kiera was someone completely different. He had fetishes. He had this weird thing about hands, where he would kill people, take their hands, and then the speed of the nail growth would be different, and he would like clip the fingernails, and he would save them for years on end. And it was really weird. Like, they were going through this guy's desk, and he had like just jars and jars of fingernail clippings. That was the weirdest thing. I know this is anime, but there's just something like really gross about that. On top of that, he was having this facade of a family. There was just layers. This was a very enigmatic character that had everyone guessing about like what's going on here, like what are some of his inner motives, and also mainly how are his abilities allowing him to do some of the things that he's doing. So JoJo Part 4 does change a lot from its predecessors, but I felt that it's more in terms of keeping the series fresh, because everything that it changed, I felt, was an overall improvement of the show. They changed the art style a little bit, which did take a little bit of getting used to, but I overall felt they did a great job of that. I think the biggest drawback for me was seeing Jotaro wear all white, considering his just appearance that we had seen in the original series, where he was wearing all black, had the giant gold chains and everything. It was just a big, like, total 180 to see him wearing like long white trench coats and white hats and everything in the fourth part right here. And on top of that, the music here, oh, they did an outstanding job with the music. I never once skipped. Like, it is rare for me to find an anime series where I never skip the openings and I never skip the endings, because I was watching this, I was even re-watching this just because I enjoyed it so much, and I felt myself thinking, I really wish I could skip these opening and outro songs, but I just love them so much, especially the last one. The last one's probably my favorite outro song of all of anime, from just what I can remember at the moment, just off the top of my head. Soundgarden, such a great song right there. I love that one. So JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable as a whole, I don't think this is particularly suited for people who are new to the franchise. That's why I tailored the review more for people who had already seen it, instead of people who are trying to get into JoJo, because this is part 4 already. You got to go back and watch from the very beginning of the show. But this is definitely something that I feel like, despite the fact that it does change some of the key components in JoJo, we get different characters, we get different villains, a different setting, and I just think part 4 is an overall improvement. And it took me about halfway through the series to realize that this was actually my favorite of all of the other parts in JoJo. Like, if I were to rank them, it would be 4, 3, I guess 1, then 2. A lot of other people would put 2 before 1, but I see it a little bit differently with that. But that's the way I feel about all of this. So what do you guys think about the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable? Let me know about that in the comment section below, and who all is excited to see that 5th part. I know I cannot wait for that. Hopefully it's animated by the same people, because Studio David does an outstanding job with JoJo, and I'd love to see them continue working on that. So anyways, let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below. If you enjoy the review, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.